Beneath the golden sands of Egypt lie stories the world was never meant to hear. Cities swallowed by the sea, monuments carved long before history remembers, and pharaohs erased from existence. The great Sphinx watches in silence, its true age whispered only by the scars of forgotten storms. Secret cults promised resurrection, while lost tombs of queens and kings hide in plain sight, mocking those who search. Every discovery reveals another layer of deception. Every excavation deepens the mystery. This is not the Egypt you think you know. This is the Egypt that refuses to be explained. Prepare to journey beyond the textbooks, into a past that may never have been meant to survive. For centuries, Herakleion was nothing more than a name whispered in ancient Greek texts, a city described as a thriving harbor of trade, religion, and power, yet one that mysteriously vanished from history without a trace. Historians doubted it even existed, dismissing it as a legend exaggerated by time. But then the sea gave up its secrets. In 2000, French archaeologist Frank Godiot and his team uncovered the remains of this forgotten city beneath the murky waters of the Mediterranean, off the coast of Alexandria. What they found was not a scattering of ruins, but an entire metropolis frozen in silence. Giant statues of gods, colossal temple blocks, coins, jewelry, and ships lay preserved in the silt, untouched for over 1,000 years. It was as if the city had been swallowed whole and left in perfect darkness. Why did it sink? Some blame earthquakes, others rising sea levels. But the truth is far from certain. Ancient texts hint at disasters that struck without warning, pulling whole neighborhoods into the water. Herakleion, once the main port of entry to Egypt, became a memory erased by nature or perhaps something else entirely. What makes Herakleion even more enigmatic is what it reveals about the world before it drowned. It was not just a harbor. It was a sacred city, dominated by the temple of Amun-Gareb, where pharaohs performed rituals to legitimize their divine power. Pilgrims came from across the Mediterranean to seek favor from the gods. Merchants traded gold, spices, and precious stones. And Greek soldiers stationed themselves in a city that served as a bridge between cultures. The artifacts recovered show a level of wealth and complexity that rivaled the greatest cities of the ancient world. And yet, it vanished almost overnight. Beneath the seabed, divers have found inscriptions and statues unlike any others in Egypt, depictions of rituals that seem strangely un-Egyptian, hybridized with Greek symbols in ways historians can't fully explain. Were these practices evidence of a deeper, older belief system lost to history? Or was Herakleion simply the unfortunate victim of nature's wrath? Even today, much of the city remains unexplored. Sonar scans suggest entire districts still buried beneath layers of mud, waiting silently for light. Each dive uncovers more questions than answers. Some shipwrecks found near the harbor are unlike any known Egyptian or Greek designs, hinting at foreign visitors from beyond the Mediterranean. Could Herakleion have been a meeting point for civilizations we barely know existed? If the sea had not hidden it, what truths would it have revealed about Egypt's forgotten past? And if one great city could be swallowed without warning, how many more are waiting beneath the waves, still holding their secrets? Exploring Herakleion is like stepping into a time capsule sealed by the sea. Divers glide past massive stone heads of forgotten pharaohs, their features softened by centuries underwater, yet still radiating a quiet authority. Columns that once held up grand temples now lie scattered across the seabed like fallen giants. At the heart of the Seisty rests the ruins of the great temple of Amun, where priests once performed rituals that tied the fate of Egypt to the will of the gods. Inscriptions speak of offerings, festivals, and processions long before the city's final moments. Yet there is an eerie stillness in the way these ruins rest, as if the city was not merely abandoned, but deliberately erased. Local legends speak of a single catastrophic night, a time when the earth shook and the waters claimed everything. But there are no clear historical records, no survivor accounts, only silence. And silence can be deceptive. Could Herakleion have been more than just a port? Was it hiding something Egypt's rulers wanted lost forever? Some historians believe it was a hub for secret knowledge, a place where priests guarded texts too dangerous to preserve elsewhere. Artifacts recovered from the site include strange ritual objects with no clear function, hinting at ceremonies that do not appear in any known Egyptian temple. There are also coins and amulets that bear symbols foreign to both Egypt and Greece, raising the unsettling possibility that cultures outside the Mediterranean once reached these shores. The deeper researchers dig, both literally and historically, the stranger the picture becomes. Even more unsettling is what lies beneath the ruins themselves. Ground-penetrating radar and magnetometer scans suggest there are deeper layers below the city already found, structures that predate Herakleion entirely. Could the city have been built over something even older? If so, what compelled the ancients to cover it rather than preserve it? Archaeologists are cautious, but whispers of a pre-dynastic origin grow louder with every discovery. And yet, for every answer the sea yields, it creates a new question. Herakleion reminds us how fragile history truly is. A city that once controlled Egypt's lifeline to the Mediterranean disappeared so completely it was considered myth. What else have we lost to time and the shifting earth? If one city can vanish beneath the waves, what about the others never even written down? Perhaps some truths are meant to be hidden, protected by the depths until humanity is ready to face them. As the divers resurface, bringing with them statues, inscriptions, and fragments of a forgotten world, one thing becomes clear. The Egypt we know is only the surface. Beneath the sand, beneath the sea, there are layers of history we are only beginning to uncover. And if Herakleion can emerge from the water after 2,000 years, what else is waiting in the dark? The great Sphinx of Giza stands motionless at the edge of the desert, its weathered face staring toward the rising sun. To most visitors, it is a silent guardian, a relic of the 4th dynasty carved during the reign of Pharaoh Khafre around 2500 BC. Egyptologists have long agreed on this date, citing the Sphinx's alignment with Khafre's pyramid and fragments of inscriptions from the surrounding plateau. But beneath the surface of this tidy explanation lies a problem that refuses to go away. The body of the Sphinx and the walls of its enclosure show deep vertical grooves and rounded edges, erosion patterns that geologists say are caused by heavy rainfall over thousands of years. Not the harsh, dry winds of the Sahara. This kind of water erosion would mean the Sphinx existed during a time when Egypt's climate was wet, perhaps as far back as 7000 BC or even earlier, long before the rise of dynastic Egypt. If this is true, it suggests something unthinkable: that the Sphinx predates the civilization we credit for building it. Could it have been carved by a lost culture, one whose history has been erased? Mainstream Egyptology rejects this, arguing that no evidence exists of an advanced society before the pharaohs. Yet the geology is not so easily dismissed. The African humid period, when torrential rains transformed the Sahara into a savanna, ended thousands of years before Khafre's reign. How could a monument supposedly built in a desert bear the scars of rainfall from a vanished age? Some propose a compromise. Perhaps the Sphinx began as a natural rock formation, eroded over millennia, and later reshaped by Khafre's workers. But that theory raises even more questions. Why would they choose an already ancient, eroded outcrop to carve into a sacred guardian? And why do ancient Egyptian texts speak of the Sphinx as if it was old, even in their time? The dream stele erected by Thutmose IV over 1,000 years after Khafre calls it ancient and powerful, hinting that even the pharaohs saw it as a relic from the distant past. Adding to the mystery, modern scans of the plateau have revealed unexplained cavities beneath the monument, possibly chambers or tunnels. Are these storage rooms for lost archives, burial chambers, or simply natural voids carved by time? No one knows, because the Egyptian authorities have restricted deep excavation under the Sphinx. Some suspect the truth lies buried just meters below its paws. But for now, the silence continues. Alternative historians take the argument further, suggesting the Sphinx could be a remnant of a forgotten civilization, one that existed thousands of years before Egypt's old kingdom. They point to legends of a first time, a mythical golden age when gods walked the earth and taught humanity the secrets of architecture and astronomy. Could the Sphinx be a monument from that lost era, later adopted and restored by the pharaohs? This theory, while dismissed by mainstream scholars, lingers because of the Sphinx's very design. Unlike later Egyptian statues, its proportions are unusual, its head strangely small compared to its massive lion body, as if it was recarved from something even older. Some propose it once bore the head of a lion, only to be reshaped into a human likeness by later rulers. If true, the Sphinx we see today is merely the latest version of a monument whose original purpose has been erased. Beneath the sands of the Giza Plateau, other clues hint at a much deeper history. Ancient burial shafts, mysterious stone blocks, and traces of long-vanished structures suggest the site was sacred long before the pyramids. Recent ground-penetrating radar surveys have detected anomalies, rectangular voids and tunnels that seem to connect the Sphinx to other hidden structures. Are these natural cavities or the remains of an underground complex? No one can say for sure. Access is tightly controlled, and excavations remain incomplete. And so the Sphinx sits silently, guarding secrets it refuses to share. While mainstream Egyptology holds to the timeline of Khafre, the geological evidence and unexplored chambers keep the debate alive. If the Sphinx is older than we think, what does that mean for the rest of Egyptian history? Did the pharaohs inherit a legacy from a civilization long lost to time, one they themselves no longer fully understood? And if the Sphinx is a relic from such an age, what else might still lie hidden, waiting to emerge from the desert sands? As we step away from the Sphinx's silent gaze, we enter another shadowy chapter of Egypt's past, one where even the identity of a ruler is uncertain. In the chaos of the Amarna period, a mysterious name briefly appeared in the records, Smenkhkare. Was he a forgotten pharaoh, a co-regent with Akhenaten, or perhaps a disguise taken by Queen Nefertiti herself? His reign, if it existed at all, lasted only a whisper of time before being erased from history. Like the Sphinx, Smenkhkare leaves us with more questions than answers, a figure blurred by deliberate silence and the passing of centuries. In the turbulent final years of the Amarna period, when Pharaoh Akhenaten's radical religious reforms fractured Egypt's political order, a name appeared briefly in the records Smenkhkare. Unlike the towering figures of Ramses or Thutmose, Smenkhkare exists as little more than a shadow in history, a pharaoh whose identity remains shrouded in uncertainty. Was he Akhenaten's younger brother, his son, or merely a pawn in a dangerous political game? The evidence is scarce and fragmented. A few inscriptions and reliefs show him as a co-regent alongside Akhenaten, sharing power during the last days of the heretic king's reign. Other artifacts, however, depict him ruling alone, suggesting he may have briefly ascended the throne after Akhenaten's death. Yet just as suddenly as he emerged, Smenkhkare vanished, leaving no grand monuments, no clear tomb, and no legacy except for confusion. Some historians believe Smenkhkare was a real but short-lived ruler, possibly dying from illness or removed by palace intrigue. Others argue he never existed as an independent person at all. They suggest Smenkhkare was simply another name for Queen Nefertiti, who may have assumed a male identity to secure power in the wake of Akhenaten's collapse. In support of this theory, a handful of reliefs depict a ruler with features too delicate to be entirely masculine, and inscriptions blur the lines between king and queen. If Nefertiti truly became Smenkhkare, it would explain why his reign left so little trace. It was deliberately obscured by those who came after. The Amarna period itself was an era Egypt's later rulers tried to erase. Akhenaten's monotheistic worship of the Aten, the sun disk, had disrupted centuries of tradition, alienating powerful priesthoods and destabilizing the kingdom. After his death, a counter-revolution swept the land. Temples to Aten were dismantled, the old gods restored, and the names of Akhenaten's allies were systematically destroyed. Smenkhkare, whoever he was, became collateral damage in this purge of memory. His possible tomb, like his identity, is uncertain. Some believe the mysterious KV 55 in the Valley of the Kings holds his remains, but the evidence is inconclusive. DNA testing has linked the KV 55 mummy to the Amarna royal family, but scholars still debate whether it belongs to Akhenaten himself, Smenkhkare, or another relative. The coffin was deliberately defaced, its inscriptions erased, as if someone wanted the occupant to remain forgotten. And so Smenkhkare remains a question mark in Egyptian history, a figure existing only in fragments and theories, a ruler erased by time and by design. The mystery of Smenkhkare deepens when we consider the deliberate erasure of the entire Amarna legacy. Akhenaten's successors, determined to restore the old gods and heal the fractured kingdom, launched a campaign to obliterate all traces of his reign. Temples dedicated to the Aten were dismantled, reliefs defaced, and even the royal city of Amarna was abandoned to the desert. In this frenzy of destruction, Smenkkare's fleeting existence was wiped away, along with Akhenaten's. Later pharaohs like Tutankhamun and Horemheb sought to distance themselves from this period of heresy, ensuring that future generations would remember only the return of tradition, not the chaos that preceded it. But in their attempt to erase the past, they inadvertently created one of the greatest historical puzzles of ancient Egypt. Who was Smenkhkare? Was he the fragile heir of a collapsing dynasty, a young prince thrust into power only to be consumed by palace conspiracy? Or was he Nefertiti, seizing the throne to preserve the vision of her husband's revolution, only to be overthrown by those longing for the old gods? Perhaps he was even Akhenaten's eldest daughter Meritaten, ruling briefly under a male name to maintain the illusion of stability. The truth may never be known. for each possibility is supported by fragments that contradict one another. Reliefs show a ruler with both masculine and feminine traits. Scarce inscriptions bear a name, but lack clear titles. Even the scant artifacts that survive seem deliberately ambiguous, as if crafted to conceal rather than reveal. The Valley of the Kings offers one more clue, but it is equally elusive. Tomb K55, discovered in 1907, contained a desecrated coffin, a defaced mask, and a mummy stripped of its identity. Genetic testing reveals the mummy belongs to the Amarna bloodline, likely a close relative of Tutankhamun. Some scholars are convinced it is Akhenaten himself, hastily reburied after his city was abandoned. Others believe it is Smenkhkare, a man, or perhaps a woman, whose very existence threatened the narrative Egypt's later rulers wanted to preserve. The truth remains sealed in silence. And so Smenkhkare, whether a real ruler or a constructed identity, lingers as an echo of one of the most unstable eras in Egyptian history. His, or her, story is a reminder that history is written by those who survive, and that sometimes the past is deliberately buried, leaving only shadows for us to chase. From this uncertainty, we descend into another mystery even older than Amarna, one that shaped Egyptian beliefs for millennia, the secretive cult of Osiris. Here, in the darkness of ancient temples, priests performed rituals of death and rebirth, guarding knowledge so sacred that it was never meant for the eyes of the uninitiated. Osiris, the god of death, resurrection, and eternal life, was one of the most beloved deities of ancient Egypt. Yet the cult that worshipped him remains cloaked in secrecy. According to myth, Osiris was a wise and just ruler who brought civilization to the people, teaching them agriculture, laws, and the ways of the afterlife. But he was betrayed by his brother Set, who murdered him and scattered his body across the land. His wife Isis, through magic and devotion, reassembled his remains and briefly restored him to life, long enough to conceive their son Horus. Afterward, Osiris descended into the underworld, becoming its eternal ruler and the judge of the dead. To the Egyptians, this was more than a story. It was the foundation of their understanding of death and rebirth, a cosmic cycle mirrored in the flooding of the Nile and the return of crops each year. But how exactly did the cult of Osiris practice its faith? Archaeological evidence suggests that the Yafar rituals were far more complex than the myths recorded in later texts. Temples dedicated to Osiris, especially at Abydos, were centers of pilgrimage, where devotees reenacted his death and resurrection in elaborate ceremonies. These rituals were not mere performances. They were believed to ensure the cosmic order and guarantee the deceased a place in the afterlife. Yet the details of these ceremonies remain largely unknown. Priests guarded their secrets closely, and what little survives is shrouded in symbolic language carved into temple walls and funerary texts. One of the most enigmatic symbols associated with Osiris is the Djed pillar, often interpreted as his backbone, representing stability, continuity, and resurrection. Djed amulets were placed in tombs to grant the dead the same rebirth as the god himself. But even this symbol's true origin is unclear. Was it an ancient architectural motif repurposed into religious meaning? Or did it encode some deeper, forgotten knowledge? Some historians argue that the Osiris cult evolved from local agricultural gods in the Nile Delta, merging over time into a nationwide faith. Others suspect it may be older than Egypt itself, a spiritual tradition inherited from a pre-dynastic civilization that left no written records. Abydos, the cult's sacred city, offers tantalizing clues. vast subterranean structures like the Osirion, a mysterious stone building buried deep below the temple complex. Its construction differs from typical Egyptian design, featuring massive granite blocks more reminiscent of megalithic architecture found elsewhere in the ancient world. Why would Egyptians build such an unusual structure to honor Osiris? Was it purely symbolic, or did it preserve knowledge too sacred to reveal? The deeper we look into the cult of Osiris, the more questions emerge. Inside the sanctuaries dedicated to Osiris, priests performed rites that the common people were forbidden to witness. Ancient texts speak of purification rituals, offerings, and reenactments of the god's dismemberment and resurrection, but they do so in cryptic terms. Some ceremonies were said to involve symbolic death, a ritual in which the initiate would die and then be reborn as one aligned with Osiris, gaining secret knowledge of the afterlife. Tomb art shows scenes of the deceased merging with Osiris, becoming one with the god to achieve eternal life. But how these transformations were believed to happen remains hidden behind layers of allegory. Certain festivals, like the Mysteries of Osiris, celebrated annually at Abydos, attracted pilgrims from across Egypt. They carried statues of Osiris in solemn processions, chanting hymns that have survived only in fragments. But the most sacred rites were reserved for the temple's inner chambers, performed by select priests who likely never recorded their practices. Some scholars speculate these rituals may have included altered states of consciousness through chanting, incense, or even unknown substances, methods to transcend ordinary reality and commune with the divine. The secrecy of the cult ensured that much of its practice died with the priests who guarded it. Even the temples themselves hold mysteries. The Osirian at Abydos, unlike any other Egyptian structure, lies sunken below ground level, with massive megalithic blocks arranged in a layout that seems older than the surrounding temple. It almost feels like the Egyptians built their Osiris shrine on top of something far more ancient, adopting a site they believed was sacred long before their time. Could it have been a remnant of an even earlier culture, one whose memory survived only through myth? And if so, what knowledge did the Osiris cult inherit from these forgotten ancestors? The cult's influence spread far beyond Abydos. Temples dedicated to Osiris appeared all across Egypt, and his myth became central to Egyptian funerary practices. Mummification itself can be seen as an attempt to mirror Osiris's resurrection, preserving the body so the soul could live again. But even as Osiris became a symbol of hope for ordinary Egyptians, the deepest truths of his worship were reserved for the initiated few. They alone knew the meaning of the hidden symbols carved on the temple walls, the chants that opened the doors to the underworld, and the secrets of the Djed pillar that promised eternal stability. In time, Osiris's story merged with other religious traditions, influencing Greek and Roman mystery cults. Yet, much of what the priests knew has been lost, surviving only as fragments carved in stone. The deeper you look, the more the cult of Osiris feels like a door half opened, revealing just enough to tempt you into wondering what lies beyond. From this realm of sacred secrecy, we move to another enduring enigma, one that is not myth, but history. Egypt's last queen, Cleopatra VII, lived in a time when gods and empires collided. She is remembered for her power, her alliances, and her tragic end. But her final resting place remains hidden, a mystery waiting patiently beneath Egypt's sands, or perhaps beneath its waters. Cleopatra VII, the last active pharaoh of Egypt, has been immortalized as a queen of beauty, intelligence, and political cunning. She ruled during a time of immense upheaval, balancing her kingdom between the growing power of Rome and the remnants of an independent Egypt. Her alliances with Julius Caesar and later Mark Antony have been romanticized for centuries. Yet her true strength lay in her ability to maneuver through the treacherous politics of two empires. When her final stand against Octavian failed, legend says Cleopatra chose death over humiliation. Ancient writers like Plutarch and Cassius Dio claimed she allowed a venomous asp to bite her, ending her life in her royal chambers. But what happened next remains a mystery that has haunted historians for 2,000 years. According to the accounts, Cleopatra was buried with Mark Antony, her lover and co-ruler, in a tomb she had prepared in advance. But no one knows where that tomb is. The ancient city of Alexandria, her capital, has changed beyond recognition. Earthquakes, floods, and rising sea levels have swallowed much of the royal quarter, leaving it buried beneath the Mediterranean. If Cleopatra's tomb lies there, it may be hidden under layers of silt and seawater, beyond the reach of conventional archaeology. Others believe she was buried not in Alexandria itself, but nearby at Taposiris Magna, an ancient temple complex dedicated to Osiris about 30 miles west of the city. Excavations there have uncovered coins bearing her image, statues in her likeness, and a network of underground tunnels and chambers. Dr. Kathleen Martinez, who has led the search for years, believes the site could hold the Queen's final resting place. Yet so far, no definitive evidence has emerged. What makes Cleopatra's tomb so elusive is not just the destruction of Alexandria, but the politics of her death. After her defeat, Octavian, soon to become Augustus Caesar, had every reason to erase her from history. Roman propaganda painted her as a seductress who corrupted noble Roman men, an enemy who brought chaos to their empire. If her tomb was hidden intentionally, it may have been to prevent desecration by the Romans, or to protect secrets she didn't want revealed. Some even speculate that her burial held more than just her body, that it concealed treasures, documents, or sacred artifacts from Egypt's dying dynasty, items too valuable to fall into Roman hands. Cleopatra understood symbolism. If she truly saw herself as the living embodiment of Isis, then her tomb would not just be a place of rest, it would be a statement, a final act of defiance. Was it hidden among temples to Osiris to ensure her memory merged with Egypt's oldest myths? Or was it deliberately concealed, waiting for a future that would never come? The search for Cleopatra's tomb has become one of the greatest archaeological pursuits of our time. Divers have scoured the submerged ruins of ancient Alexandria, uncovering palaces, temples, and artifacts from her reign, but no sign of a royal burial. Sonar scans have mapped vast sections of the coastline, revealing collapsed columns and statues resting on the seabed. Each discovery hints at the grandeur of a lost city, but offers no answers to the ultimate question. Where does Cleopatra truly rest? Meanwhile, excavations at Taposiris Magna continue to reveal more tantalizing clues. Beneath the temple's foundations, archaeologists have found secret tunnels leading to sealed chambers untouched for centuries. Coins bearing Cleopatra's likeness and carvings showing her fused with the goddess Isis suggest the site held special meaning during her reign. Could this have been where she chose to merge her legacy with Egypt's divine past? Or is it another dead end in a search that has spanned decades? Part of the enigma lies in the conflicting historical accounts. Roman writers, eager to glorify Octavian, may have altered or suppressed the truth. Some records suggest Cleopatra's body was cremated, while others claim she was embalmed in the Egyptian style. If cremated, the tomb would hold only ashes. If embalmed, it might still preserve her face, her features frozen in time. But without a definitive find, the question remains open. Even if her tomb is eventually discovered, would it truly reveal the Cleopatra we think we know? Or would it show someone far more complex than the romanticized queen of legend? A strategist, a scholar, a ruler fighting to save her country from the unstoppable tide of empire. Finding her resting place would not just solve a mystery, it would reconnect us to the final moments of Egypt as an independent civilization. It might also reveal secrets long buried with her, including sacred texts, hidden treasures, or alliances erased from history. But for now, Cleopatra remains as elusive as ever, her final act of defiance lasting millennia. The queen who defied Rome has denied even history the satisfaction of closure. She lies somewhere between myth and reality, hidden beneath earth or water, reminding us that even the most powerful figures can vanish without a trace. From this unsolved riddle of Egypt's last pharaoh, we descend deeper into another shadowy chapter of its past, into a tomb that does exist, yet raises more questions than it answers. In the Valley of the Kings lies Cave 55, a burial filled with artifacts from the Amarna period, a desecrated coffin, and a mummy whose identity has fueled decades of debate. Like Cleopatra, the occupant of Cave 55 remains a ghost of history, refusing to reveal its truth. In January 1907, in the Valley of the Kings, British archaeologists uncovered a tomb unlike any other. It was small, hastily constructed, and strangely chaotic. Inside, artifacts from Egypt's most controversial era, the Amarna period, lay scattered as if someone had deliberately dumped them there. Reliefs bearing the names of Akhenaten, his wife Nefertiti, and their daughters were mixed with objects meant for Queen Tiye, Akhenaten's mother. But the most haunting discovery was a damaged wooden coffin, with its golden face ripped away. Inside was a mummy, desecrated and stripped of identity. This tomb was labeled KV55, and from the moment it was opened, it raised more questions than answers. Whose remains lay inside this violated coffin? Some thought it must be Akhenaten himself, the heretic pharaoh who abandoned Egypt's gods for the worship of the Aten. Others argued it was Smenkhkare, the mysterious ruler who briefly appeared after Akhenaten's death. The coffin had originally been made for a woman, but inscriptions were altered to suit a male occupant. Even the tomb itself seemed temporary, as if it was never meant to be a final resting place. The scene suggested someone had been buried in haste, without the honor normally afforded to royalty. DNA tests conducted a century later added another layer of intrigue. The KV55 mummy was confirmed to be the biological father of Tutankhamun, meaning it belonged either to Akhenaten or a close relative. Yet age estimates conflicted. Some studies suggested the bones belonged to a man in his early 20s, too young for Akhenaten, who ruled for 17 years. Others argued the remains showed signs of someone in their 30s or 40s, fitting Akhenaten's timeline. Even the condition of the mummy was strange. It had been deliberately damaged, its wrappings cut, and its face destroyed, as if someone had tried to erase its identity for good. Why? The answer may lie in the political chaos following the Amarna period. Akhenaten's revolution had destabilized Egypt. His successors, eager to restore order and the old gods, sought to erase his memory. After the abandonment of Amarna, his city of heresy, royal mummies were moved and reburied in the Valley of the Kings. KV55 may have been a dumping ground for the disgraced remains of Akhenaten's family, hidden away without ceremony. Yet the artifacts inside tell a more complex story. Some items clearly belong to Queen Tiye, while others bear inscriptions linking them to Akhenaten. The coffin itself shows evidence of reuse, suggesting it was never made for the person who ultimately lay within it. Everything about KV-55 feels wrong, as if it was designed to obscure rather than commemorate. It is a tomb, but it is also a warning, a burial meant to erase a chapter of history that later pharaohs wanted forgotten. What makes KV-55 even more unsettling is the deliberate nature of its desecration. The coffin's inscriptions were hacked away, the gold mask violently pried off, and even the hieroglyphs meant to protect the soul were scratched out. Someone went to great lengths to ensure the occupant would not find peace in the afterlife. In ancient Egyptian belief, erasing a name was the ultimate punishment, a second death that condemned the soul to oblivion. Who ordered this erasure? Was it Tutankhamun, the boy king who sought to restore the old gods? Or was it Horemheb, the general turned pharaoh who systematically removed all traces of the Amarna heresy? Whoever it was, they succeeded. The tomb, the mummy, and the artifacts all seem to exist in a state of intentional confusion. Even the few inscriptions left inside KV-55 contradict each other. One wall panel honors Akhenaten, another references Nefertiti, and yet others are linked to Queen Tiye. It is as though multiple burials were combined in haste, creating a jumbled cache of disgraced royalty. Some archaeologists believe KV-55 was never meant as a true tomb, but rather a temporary holding place for mummies removed from Amarna. When Akhenaten's city was abandoned, its royal dead were relocated, but not all were given proper reburial. KV-55 might have been intended as a storage chamber, a halfway point before a more formal burial that never came. Yet the desecration suggests more than neglect. It feels like revenge. If the mummy is Akhenaten, then KV-55 represents Egypt's ultimate rejection of the man who defied its gods. If it is Smenkhkare, then the same fate awaited anyone tied too closely to that cursed legacy. And if it is neither, then KV-55 may hold another royal victim lost to the political storms of the time. What lies beyond the damaged coffin remains unknown. The tomb has been studied, scanned, and sampled, yet it yields no definitive answers. Even modern technology, DNA sequencing, CT scans, and radiocarbon dating, has only deepened the mystery by providing conflicting results. KV-55 stands as a silent contradiction, a burial that exists yet denies its own truth. It reminds us that history is not always written clearly. Sometimes it is deliberately blurred. From this tomb of confusion, we turn to a different mystery, one not buried in haste, but abandoned entirely. After the age of the Great Pyramids, Egypt suddenly stopped building monumental structures of that scale. Why did the civilization that created the wonders of Giza abruptly abandon the art of pyramid building? Was it cost, changing beliefs, or something far stranger? The pyramids of Giza stand as eternal symbols of ancient Egypt, monuments so immense they defy comprehension even today. Built during the Old Kingdom, they were not just tombs, but cosmic machines designed to connect the pharaoh with the gods. Yet after a few centuries, something changed. Egypt stopped building these colossal structures. The Middle and New Kingdoms still honored their rulers, but the age of pyramid building was over. Why did one of the greatest civilizations suddenly abandon its most iconic achievement? The official explanation is pragmatic. Constructing pyramids required vast resources, stone quarries, thousands of laborers, and decades of planning. Over time, economic strain, political instability, and threats from tomb robbers made such projects unsustainable. Later pharaohs chose hidden tombs in the Valley of the Kings, easier to protect and less costly. But this answer feels incomplete. The Egyptians believed deeply in the symbolism of the pyramid. It was a sacred form representing the primordial mound of creation and the rays of the sun. Why would they simply discard it? Some researchers suggest the truth may lie in a forgotten event, a catastrophe that shook Egypt's confidence in pyramid building. Evidence shows that many later pyramids, especially those of the 5th and 6th dynasties, suffered structural failures. Collapsing interiors, crumbling stones, and unstable foundations. Did the pharaohs abandon the practice after realizing the monuments were not as eternal as they had hoped? Or did they come to see the pyramids not as protective sanctuaries, but as targets for desecration? Tomb robbers were a constant threat, and the pyramids, visible for miles, practically invited plunder. Even in antiquity, the treasures of Giza were looted. The pharaohs may have realized that secrecy, not grandeur, was the best way to safeguard their afterlife. Yet there are deeper, more unsettling theories. Some believe the pyramids were more than tombs. They were repositories of ancient knowledge, built with techniques inherited from a civilization older than Egypt itself. If true, the abandonment of pyramid building might signify the loss of that knowledge. The precision with which the Great Pyramid aligns with the stars and the exactness of its measurements have led to endless speculation. Could the builders of Giza have possessed astronomical or engineering skills that later Egyptians simply no longer had? If so, the pyramids may not just mark the peak of Egyptian achievement, but the last echo of an even older, lost culture. Whatever the reason, the decision to abandon pyramid construction was not just a practical change, but a spiritual one. It marked a turning point in Egyptian thought, a shift from monumental expression to hidden sanctuaries. The Valley of the Kings replaced the open majesty of Giza with secrecy, carving tombs deep into rock, out of sight and away from the eyes of the living. Even as the Egyptians turned away from massive pyramids, their reverence for the form never disappeared. The pyramid shape continued to appear in small-scale monuments, temples, and obelisks, reminding the people of its ancient symbolic power. But the grand vision of constructing eternal mountains of stone faded into the past, becoming the legacy of a bygone golden age. Some ancient texts hint that the pyramids themselves were tied to a cosmic order that later generations no longer fully understood. They were said to mirror the stars of Orion's belt, connecting the pharaoh's soul with Osiris in the afterlife. If this alignment held deeper meaning, astronomical, spiritual, or even technological, it may have been lost over time. Perhaps only the earliest builders knew the true purpose of the pyramids. And when that knowledge faded, the drive to continue their construction vanished with it. Another theory suggests that the pyramid's sheer visibility became their greatest flaw. Over time, these massive tombs became beacons for looters, who stripped them of treasures and sacred texts. Later pharaohs may have seen this and decided that secrecy offered better protection for their journey to the afterlife. Thus, they turned to hidden tombs carved into cliffs and valleys, veiling their final resting places in darkness rather than sunlight. But what if the change was not purely Egyptian? Could external forces have influenced it? Some believe the earliest pyramids were built with the help of a forgotten civilization, perhaps even one with knowledge beyond what we consider possible for the ancient world. When that influence vanished, Egypt's ability to build on such a scale may have vanished with it. This idea remains controversial, yet the mystery of how the Great Pyramid was engineered continues to challenge historians and engineers alike. After all, later Egyptians tried to replicate the grandeur of Giza and failed. The bent pyramid, the collapsed pyramid of Meidum, and the crumbling pyramids of later dynasties stand as imperfect echoes of something greater. The Egyptians themselves may have realized they could no longer achieve what their ancestors, or their mysterious predecessors, had once done. And so the Pyramid Age ended, leaving behind silent monuments that still defy time and explanation. Today, we can only marvel at these structures and wonder if they were truly the work of a single civilization or the legacy of an older, forgotten chapter of human history. From the abandoned pyramids, we move to another object of intrigue, one smaller than a pyramid, yet perhaps even more mysterious. In the sacred city of Heliopolis, there once stood the Benben Stone, a relic said to represent the first mound of creation and the point where heaven touched earth. What was this stone? A mere symbol or a fragment of something far more extraordinary? In the ancient city of Heliopolis, the spiritual heart of early Egyptian religion, there once stood a mysterious object known as the Benben Stone. It was said to represent the primeval mound that first rose from the waters of chaos at the dawn of creation. According to Egyptian myth, it was on this mound that the sun god Ra first appeared, bringing light to the universe. But the Benben was more than a mere symbol. Ancient texts describe it as a sacred relic housed in the innermost sanctuary of the great temple of Ra. Priests and pharaohs would approach it with reverence, believing it to be the physical embodiment of divine power. Yet, like so many things in Egypt's sacred history, its true nature remains uncertain. What was the Benben Stone? Some accounts describe it as a smooth, conical object that glimmered in the sunlight. Others depict it as a pyramidion-shaped stone, similar to the capstones later placed atop obelisks and pyramids. But a few cryptic references hint at something stranger, an object not made by human hands. Certain writings refer to it as a stone that fell from the heavens, suggesting it may have been a meteorite or something that came from beyond Earth. If so, the Benben could have been an object of cosmic origin, its arrival sparking awe in the ancient priests who built their religion around it. It is no coincidence that the shape of the Benben influenced the design of pyramids and obelisks. Every pyramidion, every sacred pinnacle in Egypt, was said to be a reflection of this original stone. But why was it so important? Did the Benben possess properties the Egyptians could not explain, something that seemed magical to their eyes? Or was its power purely symbolic, a focus for rituals that connected the king to the gods? Modern archaeologists have searched for traces of the original Benben stone, but it has long since vanished. Some believe it was lost when Heliopolis was dismantled and its stones repurposed for later constructions. Others think it was hidden away by priests who feared its power would be misused. A few even whisper that it was taken out of Egypt entirely, spirited away during one of the many foreign invasions that stripped the land of its treasures. Without the Benben, we are left with fragments, texts, temple carvings, and myths that point to a deeper story. Was it simply a sacred stone? Or was it an artifact of unknown origin, revered because it was beyond human comprehension? The deeper one looks into the legend of the Benben Stone, the more unsettling the questions become. Ancient texts claim it radiated a strange energy, described poetically as the light of the first sunrise. Was this merely metaphor? Or did the priests of Heliopolis witness something they could not explain in ordinary terms? Some researchers believe the Benben could have been a meteoritic stone, its iron-nickel composition shimmering in a way unlike earthly rock. To the ancient Egyptians, who had never seen such a material before, it might have seemed divine, a literal piece of the heavens fallen to earth. Others, venturing into more controversial territory, suggest it could have been an artifact from a lost civilization or even an object of non-human origin. While mainstream archaeology dismisses such theories, the truth remains elusive. The Benben's influence is undeniable. It became the architectural blueprint for Egypt's most sacred structures. The capstone of the Great Pyramid was called a benbené, a direct homage to the original. Obelisks, too, were topped with miniature versions of the Benben, their sharp points catching the first rays of the morning sun. It is as if the Egyptians were trying to replicate, over and over, the shape and essence of this single lost stone. But if it was so important, why did it disappear? Heliopolis, once a grand temple complex, was slowly dismantled over centuries. Its sacred relics vanished, scattered by conquerors and forgotten by time. Some believe the priests, facing the destruction of their city, hid the Benben to keep it safe, perhaps in a secret chamber beneath the sands. Others argue it was stolen and taken far from Egypt, becoming part of the hidden treasures of another empire. Without the Benben, what remains is only its legacy, a shape repeated in monuments across Egypt, a symbol of the connection between heaven and earth. Perhaps its power was never in the stone itself, but in the belief it inspired, the rituals it centered, the way it united the living and the divine. Yet the possibility lingers that it was more than myth, that it was something extraordinary, which we no longer have the language to describe. From this enigmatic fragment of the heavens, we move to another of Egypt's great mysteries. This one not an object, but a text. Carved into tomb walls and written on papyrus, the so-called Book of the Dead guided souls through the afterlife. But was it truly a map for the dead? Or a coded manual of forgotten knowledge hidden in plain sight? The Book of the Dead is one of the most famous relics of ancient Egypt. Yet its true purpose remains misunderstood. To the casual observer, it appears to be a collection of spells meant to guide the soul safely through the afterlife. Written on papyrus, carved into tomb walls, and inscribed on coffins, it tells of gates guarded by fearsome creatures, tests of morality, and the final weighing of the heart before Osiris. But beneath this surface lies something deeper. The Egyptians did not call it the Book of the Dead. That was a name given by later scholars. To them, it was the Book of Coming Forth by Day, a manual for transforming the soul into something divine. Every spell was a step in a hidden journey, a key to unlock not only the afterlife, but the mysteries of existence itself. The text is filled with strange diagrams, cryptic invocations, and precise instructions. Why such complexity for a simple funerary guide? Some researchers believe it encoded layers of meaning, a spiritual technology designed to alter consciousness. The journey described within its pages is not linear. It takes the reader through a series of transformations, becoming a falcon, a lotus, a shining star. Was this purely symbolic? Or did the Egyptians believe the soul could truly shift forms, transcending physical reality? Even more intriguing are the recurring references to hidden gates and secret names that must be spoken to pass safely into the next realm. These names were said to hold power over the entities guarding the thresholds. In some tombs, the spells are accompanied by vivid illustrations of these gates, their shapes strangely geometric and abstract, unlike any other Egyptian art. Were they meant to depict actual locations in an unseen dimension? Or were they visual metaphors for states of consciousness? And what of the so-called weighing of the heart, where the deceased's soul is measured against the feather of Ma'at, the goddess of truth? Was this merely a moral lesson about living a righteous life, or a ritual to align the soul with a cosmic order the Egyptians believed was more real than the physical world? Some historians argue the Book of the Dead was more than a religious text. It was a codified system of knowledge, astronomical, spiritual, and possibly even scientific, preserved in a form that later generations could not fully decode. The earliest versions of these spells predate the New Kingdom, appearing in the pyramid texts of the Old Kingdom and the coffin texts of the Middle Kingdom. Over thousands of years, they evolved but never lost their core message: that death was not an end, but a transition. What exactly were the Egyptians trying to preserve through these writings? Were they describing an afterlife as we imagine it, or something far stranger? What makes the Book of the Dead even more mysterious is how it was customized for each individual. No two copies are exactly alike. The spells were selected and arranged according to the needs of the deceased, implying that the journey through the afterlife was not a single fixed path, but a personalized voyage. Some papyri are short and simple, while others are vast compilations with over 200 spells, diagrams, and hymns. Certain versions contain cryptic instructions about navigating stars and constellations, as if the soul needed a map, not just for the underworld, but for the cosmos itself. Did the Egyptians believe the afterlife existed among the stars? Or were they hinting at something we no longer understand? A connection between consciousness and the greater universe? Scholars have noted parallels between the Book of the Dead and other ancient texts from different cultures. Similar guides for the soul exist in Tibetan, Mayan, and even early Greek traditions. Is this a coincidence or evidence of a shared, forgotten knowledge about the nature of life and death? Some researchers argue that the text is less about religion and more about memory, encoding instructions to retain awareness beyond the body. The repeated use of "I remember the names" and "I know the words" suggests that survival after death required more than faith. It required mastery of knowledge. Could the Egyptians have been preserving a technology of the mind, a method for carrying consciousness beyond the physical plane? Then there is the question of its imagery. Some depictions within the Book of the Dead are disturbingly abstract. Doors within doors, spiraling corridors, and beings with hybrid forms that defy easy explanation. Are these purely symbolic, or do they represent experiences encountered in altered states of reality? Modern psychologists have noted uncanny similarities between these images and visions reported during near-death experiences or deep trance states. Was the Book of the Dead documenting something timeless about the human psyche? Even the way the text was written suggests layers of secrecy. Many spells contain riddles or paradoxes, implying that they were meant to be understood only by initiates trained in temple schools. The deeper meaning may have been deliberately hidden, accessible only to those who had already achieved a certain level of spiritual preparation. Whatever its ultimate purpose, the Book of the Dead reveals how the Egyptians viewed existence itself as a continuum, where life, death, and rebirth were all parts of a greater cycle. They believed the soul could become a star, join the gods, or merge with the eternal force of creation. But the exact mechanics of this transformation remain a mystery. locked in texts we can only partially translate. From these cryptic writings that blur the line between myth and metaphysics, we turn to another record carved in stone. A list of pharaohs that reveals more by what it omits than by what it includes. The Abydos King list, a seemingly straightforward catalog of rulers, hides within its silence the story of erased dynasties and forbidden histories. On the walls of the Temple of Seti, the one at Abydos, there is a remarkable artifact. The Abydos King List. At first glance, it appears to be a simple record of Egypt's rulers, a chronological timeline carved into stone. But upon closer inspection, its omissions are more revealing than the names it preserves. The list contains 76 pharaohs, beginning with Menes, the legendary founder of unified Egypt, and continuing through Seti III's own reign. Yet entire dynasties are missing. Akhenaten, Nefertiti, Tutankhamun, Hatshepsut, and other rulers who deviated from tradition are nowhere to be found. It is as though history itself was deliberately rewritten, entire reigns erased from official memory. Why? To the Egyptians, memory was power. To erase a name was to condemn a soul to oblivion, denying it eternal life. The Abydos King List is not a neutral record. It is an act of political and religious censorship. Seti III, like many pharaohs, wanted to align himself with the continuity of divine kingship. He had no interest in acknowledging rulers deemed illegitimate or heretical. Akhenaten, who upended centuries of tradition by worshipping the Aten alone, was considered a dangerous anomaly. Hatshepsut, a woman who ruled as a king, challenged the patriarchal order. Their names were systematically destroyed, their monuments defaced, their memories condemned. But this raises a deeper question. If entire rulers could be erased from such an important record, what else might have been omitted? Could there have been pharaohs even earlier, unknown to us because their existence threatened the official narrative? Some researchers speculate that the Abydos King List was not just selective, but intentionally deceptive, shaping a version of history that legitimized Seti's reign while hiding inconvenient truths. The layout of the list itself is strange. The names are carved in 2 rows, but in some sections, gaps appear where one might expect more rulers. Were these spaces meant for forgotten kings? Or were they deliberate blanks? A silent acknowledgement of something that could not be written. More intriguing still is what lies nearby. The so-called Abydos helicopter carvings, an unusual set of hieroglyphs that some claim depict modern-looking aircraft. While the mainstream Egyptology dismisses this as overlapping inscriptions caused by later recarving, its proximity to the king list fuels speculation. Could the temple hold older records that the later dynasties tried to suppress? The Abydos site has long been considered sacred, even before Seti I built his temple. Beneath its floors are older layers of construction, hinting at a history predating the traditional dynasties. Was the king list part of a larger effort to control how history was remembered, ensuring that only certain chapters survived? If so, what other stories have been lost forever to the sands of Egypt? The omissions on the Abydos King List are a reminder that history is not always written to preserve the truth. It is written to serve those in power. By removing the names of Akhenaten and his successors, Seti I was not simply erasing individuals. He was erasing an entire ideology. A time when Egypt had dared to break from its traditional gods and embrace a singular vision of the divine. By excluding Hatshepsut, he reinforced the idea that women should not rule as kings. By omitting entire lines of succession, he created a seamless narrative that made his own reign appear as the rightful continuation of an unbroken legacy. But what if these are not the only rulers who were erased? Some Egyptologists believe there may have been lost dynasties before the first dynasty, shadowy kings who ruled during a time now dismissed as myth. Ancient texts speak of the Shemsu Hor, the followers of Horus, semi-divine rulers said to have governed Egypt long before Menes unified the land. If such beings existed, their omission would make sense. They did not fit the neat, human lineage the pharaohs wanted to portray. Was the king list silently acknowledging a deeper history while refusing to record it openly? Even more intriguing is how the Abydos site itself connects to older traditions. Archaeologists have found evidence that the area was a center of pilgrimage for thousands of years, long before Seti the Wanderer. Beneath the temple lie ruins from earlier periods, and beneath those, even older layers whose origins remain unclear. Could the temple have been built on top of an ancient archive, a repository of knowledge from a forgotten age? If so, did the priests who compiled the king list have access to records we no longer possess? And did they choose to conceal what they found? The deliberate gaps in the list speak louder than the names it preserves. They tell us that history can be shaped like clay, molded to fit the needs of those who write it. What other secrets lie in Egypt's past, hidden not by time, but by intention? The Abydos King List closes this journey through Egypt's mysteries with a sobering realization. For every truth carved in stone, there may be another truth deliberately buried beneath it. The sands of Egypt have revealed countless wonders, yet they have also swallowed countless answers. From lost cities beneath the sea to forgotten rulers, hidden tombs, and sacred relics whose meaning is still unclear, Egypt remains a puzzle that refuses to be fully solved. Perhaps it is meant to be this way. Perhaps some parts of the past are too powerful or too dangerous to be known. And so the great Sphinx continues to watch the horizon in silence. The tomb of Cleopatra remains unfound. KV 55 keeps its secret. The Benben Stone is lost, and the Abydos King List reminds us that history is never complete. It is only what we are allowed to remember.